Hello everybody, very good afternoon. Thank you all for being with us here today. Welcome back to another session of Reports webinar series. Now, earlier we had learnt about the TDS summary reports and the QRMP tax summary reports. Now, I am here to present on the tax summary reports and the GST reports in detail that are generated in Zoho Books. Now, to begin with, we'd like to iterate that these reports are dynamic and generated based on the transactions you have created in your Zoho Books' organization. Now, these reports are presented in the exact same format as provided in the GST portal, and hence any of the GST reports might not be customizable just like any other reports. Now, we have also mentioned clear descriptions for every values in the table that is available in the report. Now, if you see, these GST reports are going to be very much crucial if you're going to file your GST returns offline, or probably even if you wish to check the amount of tax that you're going to pay, right? Okay, having this all aside, what are the reports that we are going to cover today? Firstly, we are going to explain about the tax summary report. Then we'll look into summary of outward supplies, which is your GSTR1. Then the summary of inward supplies, which is your GSTR2. Then we'll move on to the collation of summary of outward supplies and your inward supplies, which is your GSTR3B summary report. And a quick glimpse about your annual summary, which is your GSTR9. And the last two parts is going to be self-invoice summary report. And to conclude with, we will see the overseas digital tax summary report. Now, all of these tax reports are available under the report section under the header named taxes, which you are currently looking at the screen. Just a couple of things to have in mind before we start the section. We have a tax treatment which is called as out of scope. So when you're creating any of the sales or purchase transactions, if you had chosen out of scope, then please be noted that all of these transactions where out of scope is chosen will not be included in any of the GST reports. Okay, well, we'll jump on to the session. To start with, we have the tax summary report firstly. Now, a tax summary report is a summary of all the taxes that you have incurred on your purchases or your expenses, and also the tax collected for the invoices in the organization. Now, you will be able to view the total value of the taxes paid, collected during the period of time, categorized according to the tax percentage. Here, we'll jump on to the specifics of the report. Now, we shall have four major columns, which is tax name and tax percentage, which you will be setting up under the settings taxes of your Zoho Books. And then we have the taxable amount upon which the tax is applied. And finally, we have the tax amount, which is the actual GST taxes. Well, we're clear about this. Now, moving on to the further customizations of this report. Let's say that you want to view the taxes that you have paid only for your purchase transactions. How do I view that now? You have an option called as Customize Report. Just hit the Customize Report button, choose the date range, and then you have something called as Entities here. By default, all of the entities will be selected, such as the sales, purchases, and the others. You can unselect those. And now I wanted to view only the purchase transactions. Choose the purchases and hit the Run Report button. Now I get the complete report of the tax name, tax percentage, what is the taxable amount, and the tax amount for all of my purchase transactions only. Now, can I actually view a drill down of this report for the SGST 6%? Yes, this is also going to be possible. You just have to click this hyperlink here, upon which I'm clicking is 500. Now this shows the date, the entry number, nothing but the bill number, the transaction type, the transaction amount, and the tax amount. Similarly, you will have this for all of the entities, which is your sales and your purchase type transactions. Now, what are the other actions that I can perform on this tax summary report? We have approximately 3 to 4 actions that can be performed. Number 1, you can export this report, and we have given PDF as an option, XLSX as an option, XLS, CSV, and also we support to export to Zoho Sheets. Well, that's done. Secondly, you can also hit this print button and print the exact tax summary report for your organization. Well, and third, you have a share button, which is you can choose that which user can actually view the report, the tax summary report, along with the permissions can be defined. And finally, we have the scheduled report option. So just like any other reports, you also have a scheduled report button where you can choose the frequency of the report, weekly or monthly or daily, even quarterly or yearly, and the start time and the recipients as well. And you can also choose how this report format has to be, either a PDF or an CSV or XLS. Well, I hope we are pretty much clear about the tax summary report. Now we will jump on to the major tax reports. To start with, again, secondly, we have the summary of outward supplies report, which is your GSTR 1. Now, what is this GSTR 1? Now, this GSTR 1 report summarizes all of your sales transaction according to the descriptions provided in the GSTR1 format of the GST portal. Now this will show your IGST amount, your CGST, your SGST, and also the invoice total amount. And finally, it has a very important section, which is your HSN or SAC wise summary of outward supplies as well. Now this report again can be exported as a PDF or an XLS or even as a JSON format, which can be directly imported in the GST portal for your offline filing. Now we will get into this report in detail and understand all of the sections which are available here. To begin with, again, the first description says that taxable outward supplies that you have made to registered persons, including the UIN holders. Now, any sales transaction which you are doing for a GST registered business will be coming under this section. So all these values where you have made a B2B sales will be reflecting under the first section. Just getting into a drill down of this, you will have the GSTIN number, you will have the name, the place of supply, the invoice date, the taxable amount, and the tax amounts as well. Moving on to the next section, taxable outward interstate supplies to unregistered persons where the invoice value is more than 2.5 lakhs. Here, any sales that you are doing for an interstate and provided it is for an unregistered GST customer. So you have a customer who doesn't have a GST registration and the invoice value is more than 2.5 lakhs. Now, since it is an interstate transaction, you will have only the IGST being applied, and since the CGST and SGST columns are being empty here. Moving on to the next one, which is zero rated supplies and deemed exports. So, in many of the places of GSTR 1, 2 and 3B reports, you will be seeing often zero rated supplies, nil rated supplies, exempted, and non GST outward supplies. We'll first, have a glimpse at what are all these first. Zero rated supplies to start with. Now, any of the sale which is done to a overseas customer and you have applied IGST 0 on it will come under the category of zero rated supplies and any of the deemed exports. Okay. The next one is nil rated. You have even the fifth section there, nil rated, exempted, and non GST outward supplies. So nil rated is something where you only apply GST 0% and this is a nil rated supply. The other one is exempted. Now, the goods which are exempted from GST itself are basically called as exempted supplies. We can have a very basic example of agricultural products such as milk, fruits, vegetables, and all of these. And the last one would be non-GST outward supplies. So non-GST outward supplies is something where these items doesn't come under the purview of GST itself. Okay, now what are these items? We can probably take a very general example, a day-to-day example of the fuel consumption. So any sale of fuel that you do, like the petrol or diesel as such, and alcohol as well, are included under the non-GST outward supplies. Well, okay. Running back to the third section again. So zero rated supplies and the deemed exports are going to be displayed under this section. Well, coming to the next part, the fourth section, which is taxable outward supplies to a consumer. Now, any of the sale that you are making to a direct consumer, which is B2C, and they do not have a GST registration, will be displayed under this section. Now, unlike other few categories of sections, this taxable outward supplies to consumer will give you the report based upon the place of supply as per the GST format and not based on the invoice number or the customer. Well, just again, one point to note out here is that let's say you have a sale for Tamil Nadu, which is 33 state code, and the total sales is 15,000. Well, and you also have a 4,000 of a credit note being created for the B2C sales. Let it be for a different customer, but for a same place of supply 33. Now, what we'll have to do here is that under the taxable amount from the 15,000, we'll have to less down this 4,000 and display the taxable amount as 11,000, which we have done here. So this is how the taxable outward supplies to the consumer report actually works. Okay, moving on to the next one. Nil rated, exempted, and non-GST outward supplies. As I told you, nil rated, GST 0%, exempted, where the goods are exempted from GST, and non-GST outward supplies. Any non-GST supply, such as fuels, petrol, diesel, and all of these will come under this section. So the next one which we have is the details of debit notes, credit notes, and refund vouchers. So as the name suggests, if you have any credit notes, any debit notes, any refunds that you have done for the customer, provided it is a B2B customer, where you are creating all of these transactions for a customer who has a GST registration, will display under this section. Now moving on to the next section, just similar to the above, you will have the next section, which is details of credit, debit notes, and refund vouchers. But the only change here is that it is for unregistered. So the former one was for registered customers, registered GST business customers, and the next one is for unregistered customers. Moving on to the next one now. We have a consolidated statement of advances received. Now let's say that you have received an advance from your customer and you have applied GST on that, okay? And you have not adjusted these advances on any of the invoices. So all of these transactions, advanced transactions where you've applied the tax, shall be reflected under the consolidated statements of advances received. Okay, just come to the next section where you see the tax already paid on advance receipt on invoices issued in the current period. We'll have to look into here, very much clearly. We'll take an example here again. Let's say that you have collected advances from your customer in any of the previous reporting periods. Let's say in the month of August, or in the month of July, June, or September. Well, and you are adjusting these advances collected and taxes applied on the invoices in the current filing period. Okay, current filing period. So those are going to be reflected here. So in the above one says that consolidated statement of advances received, where all the advances which you have collected and applied the taxes are going to come under that section. The second one, as in the last second one, will have the transaction where you have collected the advances in the previous period and adjusted all of these advances in the current period. Okay. Now this section actually helps you to ensure that the GST is only paid once on the actual supply, avoiding any of the double taxation on the advance receipts. Okay, now we have come to the end of your summary of outward supplies. The last and final one for your GSTR 1 would be HSN or SAC wise summary of outward supplies. Now this is a very important section out there for you. This section will classify all of your goods or services. For goods, it is going to be HSN code. For SAC, it is going to be services. Now, this will ensure that you are correctly categorizing all of these supplies and calculating the appropriate taxes for the HSN or SACs, basically your items. Now, properly reporting all of these under your HSN or SAC codes will help you to streamline your GST process. It will definitely reduce the errors and ensures you have a transparency in the tax reporting. Well, so here you will have the columns such as quantity, the unit of measurement, your HSN or SAC, we call them the tax rate, and the similar taxable amount, GST amounts, IGST, CGST, SGST, and any cess amounts. Well, we have completed our GSTR 1 report, your summary of outward supplies. Similarly, we have summary of inward supplies, just like the summary of outward supplies. So summary of inward supplies is also known as your GSTR 2, right? So like the GSTR 1, this report also sums up all the purchases made by the taxpayer, and based on this report, your input tax credit is being calculated. Now, just like the existing report which we saw, which is your GSTR 1 report, this also has the description column, the IGST amount, the CGST amount, the SGST, and the bill total. When you actually look into this GSTR 2 report, this GSTR 2's filing is currently being halted by the government, and hence you are not required to file your GSTR 2. Instead, you can actually do a reconciliation of your GSTR 2A and your GSTR 2B under Zoho Books itself. So ideally, the inward supplies report can be used just for your internal reference as of now. We will have a quick run through of the summary of inward supplies report. So we have the description first, IGST amount, CGST amount, SGST amount, and bill total. Okay. Moving on to the sections, purchases received from registered taxpayers. Any purchases that you do from a registered GST vendor will display in this section. Purchases received from unregistered taxpayers, as the name suggests, any vendor who's not registered for GST and you are purchasing it from them, you will have these details under this section. Details of credit or debit notes or refund vouchers, similar to your GSTR 1. Again, details of credit, debit notes, refund vouchers for unregistered vendors. So the above one first for the registered vendor, and the second one was for the unregistered vendors. Moving on to the next, goods or capital goods received from overseas. So these are basically your import of goods, well, and you have created a bill of entry for that. The next one is services received from overseas. Any of the services which you're purchasing from an overseas vendor. Again, the next one would be supplies received from compounding dealer and other exempt nil and non-GST supplies will come under this section. HSN wise summary of inward supplies. So HSN or SAC wise purchases will be listed out here. So TDS credit received and ISD credit received is currently not supported in Zoho Books, and hence it is being blank right now. The next section is going to be inward supplies, on which the tax is to be paid on reverse charge. Any purchases that you make and on that you apply a reverse charge, those transactions are going to be mentioned under this section. Final two sections is going to be advances paid on account of receipt of supply, where all of your vendor advances, where the GST is being paid off, you will have all of these transactions under the last second section. And advanced adjusted on account of receipt of supply. Let's say you have made a purchase in the previous month, you have made a vendor advance in the previous month and you apply it on the current month's bill as such. Well, you adjust these advances on the current month, would be displayed here. Okay, I hope we all are clear about the summary of inward supplies report as well. Now we will move on to GSTR 3B summary. Now, what is this GSTR 3B summary finally? Collating all of these summary of outward supplies, summary of inward supplies, we have the GSTR 3B report. Now, GSTR 3B is going to be a monthly return that is to be filed by every GST registered business. And this will have all of the consolidations of your outward supplies, inward supplies, and the details of your input tax credits, along with the payment of taxes. Again, this report is also going to be in the GST portals format, and you also can export this as a JSON to file it in the portal, or you can also use the GST filing feature, online GST filing feature from Zoho Books as well to file your GSTR 3B summary. Now we will go through all of these sections in detail. To start with, we have the first section, which is 3.1, the details of outward supplies and inward supplies, which is liable to reverse charge. Under 3.1, we have a subsection A, which says that outward taxable supplies other than zero rated, nil rated and exempted. So all of your sales transactions are going to be listed here, except the ones where you have applied IGST 0, zero rated, nil rated, GST 0%, and the exempted goods. So all of these values are going to be collated and shown up in this 3.1 subsection A. Just coming to the next part, which says outward taxable supplies zero rated. So all of your IGST 0 transactions, basically your overseas transactions, are going to be listed under this section B. Coming to the section C, other outward supplies, which has the nil rated and exempted. So only your GST 0% and the exempted goods supplies are going to be displayed under the 3.1 subsection C. This is the third section. Moving on to the next, we have inward supplies, which is liable to reverse charge. Now, any of your purchases which you are doing and where the reverse charge is applied on those transactions is going to be displayed under the 3.1 subsection D. Finally, for 3.1 table, we have non-GST outward supplies. Any of the sales which falls under the non-GST outward supplies, as we discussed earlier, what is non-GST, will be falling under the subsection 5. Okay, so we are clear about these 5 specific sections. We will move on to the 3.1.1 table, which is the details of supplies notified under subsection 5 of section 9 of the CGST Act. This is your Central Goods and Services Tax Act. The subsection 1 of this says that taxable supplies on which electronic commerce operator, which is your e-commerce operator, pays tax under subsection 5 of section 9. Now this has to be furnished by the e-commerce operator and not by you, and hence this is being grayed out here. Now what is the column that we need is taxable supplies made by registered person, basically by a registered GST registered customer, okay, through electronic commerce operator via any e-commerce platform, let's say such as Amazon or Flipkart, and you apply reverse charge on that specific invoice. On this specific invoice, your e-commerce operator is required to pay tax under the subsection 5 of section 9. So just a couple of checkpoints here. You have an invoice that is made by a registered person, which is a GST registered business, via an e-commerce operator, and you apply the reverse charge mechanism here, and it is a sale via an e-commerce operator. The e-commerce operator is liable to pay the tax under the subsection 5 of section 9. So these details are going to be reflected under the 3.1.1 section. Well, we have only 2 tables here. Moving on to the next one, which is 3.2 of the supplies shown in 3.1 under the subsection A above, and the details of interstate supplies made to unregistered persons, unregistered customers, composition taxable persons, customers, and the UIN holders. Now, what does this report contain here again? Firstly, supplies made to unregistered persons, unregistered customers. Any sale that you are making to an unregistered person, which is basically a B2C customer who doesn't have a GSTI number, will be categorized based on the place of supply. Similarly, we saw in GSTR 1. Now here in our case, it shows that for Andhra Pradesh, I have a total taxable value of 220,762.71 and the IGST applied is 26,237.29. Similarly for Telangana, for 36 state code, I have 3 lakhs here, and what is the IGST amount? Now just similar to the supplies made to unregistered persons, when you are making any sale to a registered business but with a composition scheme, if any customer is registered under the composition scheme of GST and you're making a sale to them, those will also be categorized based on the place of supply and not based on the invoice number here. Finally, we have the supplies made to UIN holders. So it is currently not supported in Zoho Books, and we are not tracking these supplies here. Moving on to the next table, which is your eligible ITC, your input tax credit. So now what is this input tax credit here? Any of the taxes that you have paid to your vendor, and you will be claiming those in the form of input tax credit. Well, this is basically the whole concept of input tax credit, right? So we have broken it down completely. Under this table 4 of eligible ITC, what are the sections available? So the first section is import of goods. Now any purchases that you are doing from an overseas vendor and you have created a bill of entry for this. This specific value will show the import of goods. 2 checkpoints here. If you are importing the goods from an overseas vendor and you have created a bill of entry. If you have not created a bill of entry, the import of goods section again will be 0 only. Next part is import of services. Any services that you are availing from an overseas vendor will be displayed under the subsection 2 for you. Coming to the next one, which is invert supplies liable to reverse charge other than the 1 and 2 above. So exempting this import of goods and import of services, what are the transactions, purchase transactions, which you have created, those are liable to reverse charge, will be displayed under the subsection 3. Now coming to the next part, which is the subsection 4, inward supplies from ISD. We do not support this in Zoho Books, and hence this is being grayed out currently. And finally, we have the all other ITC. So what is this all other ITC? Now we are making any sort of purchases from a vendor, okay, from a registered vendor as such, okay, and not being any of the import of goods from, not from a overseas customer or any composition as such. You will be recording the purchase bills in Zoho Books, and those bills containing the ITC details will be reflected under the all other ITC. Well, clear about this eligible ITC part. We will move on to the last and final section of GSTR 3B, which says that value of exempt nil rated supplies and the non-GST inward supplies. Any of the purchases that you are making will be categorized based on the composition scheme, exempted scheme, and nil rated, will be again categorized into interstate supplies and intrastate supplies, basically outside of the state and within the state, and will be displayed in two sections: composition scheme, exempted supplies, nil rated, and the last one would be non-GST supply. It will be categorized under these two sections, any of the purchases that you have made. With this, we have completed our GSTR 3B report, summary of GSTR 3B. Now, hoping that you all have a very brief understanding about what are the contents of GSTR 3B report, we will move on to our next report, which is your GSTR 9, your annual summary report. Now, what is the GSTR 9 summary report? This will be a annual return that any of the regular taxpayers must file every year. This will contain the details of all the supplies that were made and received during the financial year, along with the turnover and the audit details. Now, this report is completely generated based on the transactions created in Zoho Books only. Since this being a very dynamic report as such, you will have to hit this regenerate button each and every time if you are making any changes to the transaction pertaining to the specific time period. Now, let's say if you have made any changes to the transactions which are pertaining to 1/4/2023 to 31/3/2024, I'll have to come and regenerate this to have the updated report here. So this is all about the GSTR 9 summary. We also have posted a brief video about GSTR 9, understanding all of the part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, and part 5 here. We will also, after this webinar is ended, we will also post the video link of that, which you can go through and have a complete understanding about the GSTR 9 summary report. Apart from these GST reports, which is your GSTR 1 report, your GSTR 2 report, your GSTR 3B, and your GSTR 9, we have a few other tax reports, such as self-invoicing summary and the overseas digital tax summary report. Before we get into what is self-invoice summary report, we need to understand a concept here, which is reverse charge mechanism. Now, let's say when you are purchasing from any of the unregistered vendor or an overseas vendor, you are entitled to report all of these purchases to a government body and pay the taxes in a certain cases, such as advocate fees, the GTA, etc., and all of these. And you will be claiming all of these input tax credits in the upcoming month's filing. Now, to do this itself, we will have to generate a self-invoice summary, or basically a self-invoice, which will display the taxes just above the bill created. We will check a transaction, how it is being reflected. I am choosing this RCM1 transaction. It is basically a bill where the GST shall not be reflected on the bill because it is an unregistered vendor or an overseas vendor. This reverse charge summary will show that the reverse charge rate, say CGST 6% and SGST 6%, GST 12% basically. Tax amount is 1330, total it is 60. The self-invoice number will also be auto-generated. I will just edit this report as well to show you the checkpoints. So I have created an employee A, just ignore the vendor name please, and the GST treatment is unregistered business, and I have chosen this option. This transaction is applicable for reverse charge, and I have chosen GST 12% from the list and eligible for ITC. Based on all of these, my self-invoice summary shall be generated, which says the date, the self-invoice number, and the transaction number, bill number basically, IGST amount, CGST, SGST, and the cess amount as such. So I hope we are clear about the self-invoicing summary, right? We will move on to the final report for the day, overseas digital tax summary. Now, what is this overseas digital tax summary report? Now, this report will summarize all the taxes that you have charged for the supply of digital services, basically the sale of digital services for your overseas customers. Now, if you would wish to, track these specific amounts, the taxes and the items with a tagline of overseas digital tax summary, what is the checkpoints that I'll have to follow first? We'll look at that. I'll navigate to the settings. I'll come to the taxes and compliances head, under which I go to the taxes, come to the GST settings. Firstly, ensure that under digital services, track the sale of digital services to overseas customers is enabled, this option. Once this is enabled, please come to the tax rates. Now I have created an existing tax rate here. Let me show that to you. The tax name is AED tax 5%. Tax percentage is 5. The tax type is basically sale of digital services to overseas customer. So I've just checked in this option. The country or the region, I've chosen it as UAE, United Arab Emirates. And in which account do you wish to track all of these sale of digital services? Once you have done this, you are good to go to create your items, which is of digital services. You can come to the items, hit the new item button, click on service and enter the service name, and ensure that you have chosen it is a digital service, and enter all of the details here to create the item. Post which you can go ahead and create the overseas digital tax summary report. Here, breaking down this, it shows the consumption country, United Arab Emirates, tax name 85%, the currency is 85 AED, and the taxable amount, which is 1000, and the tax amount, which is AED 50 dirhams as such. The next one is for Virgin Island, the USA, USD tax 15%, currency is USD, taxable amount is $60.90, and the tax amount is $9.014 dollars as such. Now, this is all about your overseas digital tax summary report. Now, we will just have a quick recap of what are the reports that we had covered today. Firstly, we covered the tax summary report, which will have all the details of your taxes, right, starting from your purchase transactions, for your sales transactions and all of those. And these reports can be exported as well. And it can be scheduled or shared with any of your users. The next one we saw was your summary of outward supplies, nothing but your GSTR1, which is basically your sales transactions. summary of inward supplies, which is your GSTR2, and currently the GSTR2 filing is being suspended by the government. Okay, and then we had seen the GSTR3B summary, which is a collation of summary of outward supplies and your inward supplies. And then we moved on to your annual summary report. We had a short glimpse about what is GSTR9, and then we had seen final two last summaries, which is your self invoice summary and your overseas digital tax summary report. Now with this, we have come to the end of this webinar session, today's webinar session. And if you have any of the questions related to these reports, please feel free to post it in the question and answers tab and not in the chat tab, so that we will look into all of these questions and answer it to you promptly. Well, so we have the first question as, is there any solution if any supplier does not make payment of GST collected by them, and accordingly we do not get a credit of it? Well, so in Zoho Books, we have an option of online GST filing, right? So when you go to the online GST filing tab under GSTR 3B, you also have a small button under the eligible ITC which says that adjust ITC. Okay, you can just hit the adjust ITC button and enter the ITC which you are actually going to avail. So you can do your GSTR 2B reconciliation and get the amount of ITC and enter that number, the value basically, when in the adjust ITC column, and then you can push it to the portal to avail the input tax credit as such. We have the other question, what is the difference between zero rated, nil rated and exempted non-GST rates? Well, so first, as we explained earlier, zero rated means that wherever you are applying IGST 0. Well, nil rated is that where you are applying GST 0%. So 0 rated means that it is for an overseas basically, okay, and nil rated will be GST 0% which you are applying. And exempted is something where these goods are completely exempted from GST itself, such as a very good example, agricultural products. And non-GST rates, so it's non-GST supplies basically. So what are non-GST supplies? Examples could be your fuels, your day-to-day consumption, your petrol, diesel, even electricity comes under the non-GST supplies, and alcohol as well. So these are the non-GST supplies. So I hope this is clear. So where can we find the international bill details? Basically your overseas bills is what I'm presuming, right? So for that you can actually refer the bill details report under the reports section. So I've navigated to the bill details report, and you have a customization where the advanced filter option is available. You can apply the GST treatment is in overseas and run the report. Currently there is one transaction with the status overdue, the bill date, due date, bill number, vendor name, bill number, and the balance amount. You also have a few other customizations under the show or hide columns. We have the next question, how to maintain books of expenses party wise, basically vendor wise, right, for claiming input taxes of expenses incurred. Now what you can do is, when you are creating a purchase expense or a purchase bill in Zoho Books, you will also have a field called as vendor. So all the vendor, basically a party here, okay, will be listed out there, and from that list you can choose the vendor out there for an expense and save it, so that when you're actually running your report, let it be your GST or 3B report or your GSTR 2 report, and even your expense details report, you will also have the GST amount being included. We have the other question, which is digital invoice is same as export of service invoice. So, well, digital invoice, I'm presuming that Mr. Prakash is referring to an e invoice, right? So, e invoice is different, well, and e invoice is applicable for a taxpayer and for the customers who are registered, who are in SEZ for overseas as such. Well, so both are basically different. The digital invoice, which is the e-invoice concept, and the export of services invoice is different. Well, how to download the month-wise report? Because I'm able to download the report from period to period, but can't able to download the report month-wise as such. See, in many of our reports, we have an option. Ideally, in all of the reports, firstly, you have an option of customized date range. Okay, so it's not only for the period of, like, let's say previous month or this month, which you can run. You can also run it for a custom date range. Apart from that, in a few reports, we also have something called as compare option. Now, let's say a profit and loss report which you take. Well, in that we have given a compare with option where you can compare it with the previous periods. Let's say if you want to compare the values with the last 3 periods as such, you can very well do that. I hope this answers the question. Well, we have the other question. Can we have reports for paid vendor list? Yes. Under the report section, you have an option of payments made report. So you can run this report to find out how much you have paid to a vendor, what is the receipt number, the payment voucher number, and on what all bills you have adjusted this. Basically, for what all bills you have made a payment under one single voucher. So Musaji Sethi has raised a question which asks that if we need to edit any invoice for which GST is already filed, what are the options? Okay, so first thing is that if we have filed the GST, there are chances very less that you're actually going to edit the invoice as such. But we'll take a worst case scenario here. You are going to make the amendments in the portal, in the GST portal, and then you wish to change that in your accounting solution, which is Zoho Books here. Okay. In Zoho Books, if you have marked the GST returns as filed, GSTR1 as filed, Zoho Books will not allow you to edit the transactions pertaining to that period. So you can go to the GSTR1, and under the GSTR1, you also have an option called as mark as unfiled. You can mark the returns as unfiled only in Zoho Books, okay, and go to the transaction, edit the transaction, make the changes, save it, and again go back to the GSTR1 to mark it as filed again. So we're taking up another question, and the question is, can we bifurcate how much ITC can we take according to the GSTR2B to match it with my ITC in my books? Well, so see, in Zoho Books, you have the GSTR2B reconciliation, right? So that GSTR2B reconciliation is going to give you the value of what is the actual ITC you are entitled for. You can take these values, and while filing the GST, if it is from Zoho Books, you have an option of adjust ITC under the eligible ITC option. Okay, you can enter the value there and push it to the portal to go ahead with the filing. Wherein, if you are filing it manually in the GST portal directly, you can go to the GST portal, and how much ever you would like to avail the ITC, you can mention it there. There's one more question. Can I change the approval for wrong month selected while GST filing? So we presume that you are filing the GST returns from Zoho Books itself, and you have submitted the filing for an approval, but you've done it for a wrong month instead of your respective month, which you will have to, right? So for this, what you can do is you can actually ask the approver to reject this specific GST filing return, okay, and post which you can again submit this for approval for a different month, for the whichever month you'd like to file the returns. We have the same question again. How to maintain books of expenses party wise for claiming input tax of expenses incurred Please explain again. Okay, well, all right. See, when you are actually creating an expense, purchase expense in Zoho Books, right? Similar to the expense accounts, GST columns and all of these, you also have a field called as vendors. Okay, so if you choose the vendor, the GST in number and the GST in treatment would be auto populated from the vendor master, and you will be choosing the GST, the applicable GST for that specific expense. Well, and you will choose it as if it is eligible or it is ineligible, and you will save it. Now, when you are doing this, the report gets automatically updated. Let it be your GSTR 3B report, or let it be your GSTR 2 report as well. Both gets updated that, hey, this is the expense and this is the vendor for which X amount of GST is applied, and these are the details as such. You can also view the expense details report, which will tell you the details of what is the GST amount that is being applied. Now this is for the expense voucher which we are talking about, right? But when you look into the bills as such, by default you will need a vendor name, GST number of the vendor and all of these, right? When you're creating with those details, automatically again the all other ITC is going to be updated, and similarly all of your bill details report and the relevant reports will be updated. So we have another question. Can you please help me understand a case where multi-currency, how is the difference in exchange rate is accounted? Well, we'll take a instance here. Okay, let's say that you have an invoice which you have created for an overseas customer, let's say a USD customer, and it's for $10 at the rate of 70 rupees. Okay, 70 is the exchange rate on the rate of creation of invoice. Now let's say after like 10 days you are receiving the payment, but the payment is received at 75 rupees, right? So this difference is there, right? This will be automatically recorded under the exchange gain or loss account, and this will be reflecting under your profit and loss report. So just to summarize here, when you create an invoice, you will have the exchange rate option, and when you are actually recording the payment as well, you will have an exchange rate field where you can enter the exchange rate. We shall also automatically fetch the exchange rate as well, but if you'd like to make the changes to it, you can make the changes and you can hit the save button based on the invoice date's exchange rate and the payments received payments received exchange rate. We will be calculating the exchange gain or loss here. So in this case, it is an exchange gain, and this will be reflecting under the profit and loss report. We have one final question for the day, which is we need to have multi-level reporting, example cities in a region in one report. Well, firstly for this, in Zoho Books we have something called as reporting tags, right? So you can create multiple reporting tags here. So in this case, you create one reporting tag, two reporting tags, one with the city and the other with the region as such. Okay, and while you create a transaction, let's suppose you're creating a sales transaction or probably even a purchase transaction, you will be associating both of these reporting tags, correct? Now when you're associating this, automatically when you're running the report, let's say you're running a profit and loss report, all right, or a balance sheet report, if you want to view for let's say you will take it as Chennai. Okay, so for Chennai we have north, south, east and west as specific segregation out here, category here. Well, so what we'll do is we need to view it for Chennai south as such. You will run two reporting tags and run the report so that you will get the report based on Chennai as the city and south as the region here. So this is a way to handle your scenario. Now with this we come to the end of today's webinar session. Once again, thank you so much everybody for joining us today. You've been a wonderful audience. We have answered all of the questions here. If we have any left out questions, we will be answering it from our support. And also if you have any queries with respect to Zoho Books, please reach out to us via a toll free number, or you can also reach us out on our email, which is support.india@zohobooks.com. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Thank you so much.